Good morning. I hereby call to order this second meeting of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission for the year 2020, and I ask that you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As always, I ask that you please note the safety information on the inside of today's agenda cover. And also remember that the Commission will act on various matters at today's meeting, which is open to the public. However, since adequate quorums or forums have been made available for public participation in cases before the Commission, there is no opportunity for the public to address the Commission at this public meeting. The first matter on this morning's agenda is the approval of the minutes for December 19, 2019, and I look to Commissioner Unora, who is the editor.
Madam Chair, I have reviewed the minutes of the December 19, 2019 public meeting and recommend that they be approved as submitted.
You have heard the motion of Commissioner Unora to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Place. Any further discussion or edits? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. And now we will call upon our Secretary, Rosemary Chiavetta, to lead us through this morning's agenda.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Your bureaus and offices have prepared the following agenda for your consideration. Therefore, let us begin on page 1 with the recommendation of Director Monahan and the Bureau of Audits that the Commission release the audit report of the PECO Energy Company to the public.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coleman, second by Commissioner Unora. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 2, in matters presented by Director Sophie and the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended in an omnibus motion that the Commission adopt both items on page 2, beginning with the formal complaint of Respond Power versus Penelec and the West Penn Power Company, and continuing on page 3 to include and end with the formal complaint of Karen Fite and H. Mendoza versus Duquesne Light.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Vice Chairman Sweet, second by Commissioner Place. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Continuing on page 3, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed opinion and order in the formal complaint of James Elliott versus the Pennsylvania Electric Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Unora, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Let me reverse that. I'm going too quickly for myself. So I ask that we go back and reconsider the vote. And with that, is there any objection to reconsidering the vote?
Nope.
Seeing none.
Doesn't require a motion, but regardless, I think
We can do it by unanimous consent. If there's no objection, we're going to reconsider the vote.
That works.
That works. And I do have a statement on here. We're moving too quickly. I'm moving too quickly for myself, so I do apologize. So on this matter, I ask that my statement be spread upon the record as if I read it in its entirety. And with that, I will condense my statement. On July 16, 2018, James Elliott filed a complaint against Pennsylvania Electric Company alleging, among other things, erroneous billing and poor customer service. By initial decision issued on December 19, 2018, the complaint was dismissed with prejudice due to Mr. Elliott's failure to appear at the hearing. On January 4, 2019, Mr. Elliott filed exceptions arguing that the matter should not had been dismissed because he experienced a medical emergency causing him to miss the hearing and that he submitted a doctor's certification of such as directed by the ALJ. Because, review of the record shows that Mr. Elliott's wife sent an email to the ALJ on the evening prior to the hearing stating that Mr. Elliott would not be able to attend due to a medical emergency. Because that message was not received until the morning of the hearing was convened as scheduled in Mr. Elliott's absence. After the hearing concluded, the ALJ issued an interim order directing Mr. Elliott to provide medical certification of his emergency to prove that his failure to appear was unavoidable, no later than December 17, 2019. Mr. Elliott filed the requested information 2 days late on December 19, 2019. This was the same day that the initial decision dismissing the complaint with prejudice was issued. I agree with the dismissal of the complaint. However, the matter should have been dismissed without prejudice. Two factors supporting a dismissal without prejudice are the claim of medical emergency as well as the complainant's pro se status. With regard to the instant exceptions, because the requested medical certification was ultimately produced, although 2 days late, I do acknowledge that, the complainant's exceptions should be granted to remand the matter for a hearing. So with that, I will be dissenting on this matter. Once again, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I will be dissenting. The matter passes 4-1, noting my dissent.
Turning to page 4, in matters presented by Director Diskin and the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, it is recommended in an omnibus motion that the Commission adopt both items on page 4, beginning with the application of Chima Energy Solutions LLC, and continuing to adopt both items on page 5, and the first two items on page 6, ending with the application of Operator Service Company LLC.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Finally, on page 6, it is recommended that the Commission publish the quarterly earnings report of Pennsylvania Utilities.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Unora, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion?
Is that a statement on the matter?
Commissioner Place.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, I ask that my statement be placed into the record as if I'd read it in its entirety. Before us today is the report by the Bureau of Technical Utility Services to the Commission regarding quarterly earnings of Pennsylvania Utilities for the quarter ended September 30th, 2019. This commission proposes to retain the proxy return on equity for gas and water of 10.00 and 9.95 respectively, and reduce the proxy ROE for electric utilities from 9.55 to 9.44. Sorry, 9.55 to 9.45. While I support the reduction in proxy ROEs for electric utilities in the interest of gradualism, I continue to oppose the proxy ROEs for gas and water, as holding them unchanged lacks empirical justification and exceeds industry average ROEs, despite a very low risk and attractive cost recovery climate in the Commonwealth. As more fully quantified in my written statement, proxy ROEs remain far above and inconsistent with fundamental discounted cash flow and capital asset pricing model ROE analysis provided by Commission staff for all three utility groups. Additionally, proxy ROEs remain above the average national rate case ROEs granted to electric and natural gas utilities by other state commissions, as published by S&P Global Market Intelligence's RRA regulatory analysis. These high proxy ROEs are being approved despite very low financial risk for Pennsylvania utilities, as reflected by their above-average equity ratios and very supportive rate-making policies, such as a distribution system improvement charge and fully projected future test year, which have significantly reduced regulatory lag, thus elevating earned returns. For water utilities, these earned returns have been further elevated by acquisition premiums associated with the acquisition of municipal and municipal authority systems. Historical proxy ROE setting at this commission has been inconsistent, particularly illustrated in the water industry, which has the longest history of utilizing a DISC mechanism. Prior to Act 11, there was a very strong correlation and near equivalence of proxy ROEs and the staff DCF analysis. However, after Act 11, proxy ROEs moved significantly above the corresponding DCF analysis and not demonstrated a significant correlation to that analysis. Put another way, in the 2000s, this commission approved DISC ROEs which were, on average, approximately 20 basis points above the corresponding DCF and tracked DCF closely. Conversely, however, in the 2010s, this commission approved DISC ROEs which were on average 70 basis points above the corresponding DCF and divergent from DCF. Similar results are apparent for the electric and natural gas industries for post-Act 11 ROE determinations. In essence, since the enactment of Act 11, the Commission has deviated upwards from the staff reports regarding important market indicators that have driven sound Commission decisions for decades. This shift in proxy ROE setting has not been justified. There has been no documentation that historical ROE methodologies tied to DCF were insufficient to attract necessary investment capital. If anything, clear evidence shows that the Commission's ROEs and rate setting are resulting in utilities selling at high multiples of their underlying asset base, a strong indication that returns are in excess of market rates for similar stable investments. Moreover, the York Water Company, an arguably well-managed public utility, has successfully proceeded with the replacement of customer-owned lead service lines under applicable Commission directives without earning a return on these capital investments. As I documented in my last quarterly earnings report statement, this is not simply an esoteric academic abstraction. For example, for residential electric prices, in rank order from least expensive state to the most expensive, Pennsylvania ranked 21st in 2017. However, by November 2019, the average Pennsylvania residential electric price was 14.07 cents per kilowatt hour, moving Pennsylvania's rank towards the back of the pack at 37th nationwide, with another 2-state drop the last quarter alone. Moreover, an ROE which is 100 basis points above the analytically derived ROE, the approximate ROE increment above the calculated figures and before the Commission today, hypothetically applied over the rate base of the major electric, gas, and water utilities, would amount to roughly $253 million in excess retail rate impact annually. Ratepayer costs in Pennsylvania are substantial. Overly rich ROEs contribute to this drag on business and household economics. I support the public release of the staff report, which is thorough and comprehensive. However, for the reasons stated, I will vote in opposition to the motion to adopt the Commission's proposed electric, natural gas, and water utility proxy ROEs. A 10 basis point reduction for each industry sector would be just and reasonable and directionally warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Place. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
The motion passes 4-1, noting the dissent of Commissioner Place.
Turning to page 7, and matters presented by Chief Counsel Hicks and the Law Bureau. It is recommended in an omnibus motion that the Commission adopt both items on page 7, beginning with the petition of reconsideration filed by Bradley Lewis, and continuing on page 8 to include and end with the tentative order regarding the cancellation of certain motor carriers.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Unora. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Continuing on page 8, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed order in the petition for reconsideration filed by the Office of Consumer Advocate regarding the Customer Assistance Program Policy Statement.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion?
I have a brief statement, Madam Chair.
Vice Chairman Sweet.
Thank you. Before the Commission is consideration and disposition on the merits of a petition for reconsideration filed by the Office of Consumer Advocate, OCA. While I find that OCA has not met the standards for reconsideration, I do believe that the arguments raised by OCA in its petition, particularly regarding the impact of low-income home energy assistance program, LIHEAP grants, on customer assistance programs, CAPS, has some merit. This topic has been extensively analyzed in both the energy affordability and review of universal service proceedings. I have reviewed the comments filed then, in addition to exploring this matter generally, and have concluded that this issue is much broader and should require increased involvement and discussion with the Department of Human Services, DHS. In fact, previously I've publicly commented on this very subject, even so far as asking parties to provide perspective on ways enrollment and coordination could be improved upon, given the complementary benefits offered by both CAP and LIHEAP. For years, the Commission has formally and informally engaged with DHS through participation in a LIHEAP advisory committee, as well as filing comments to the annually proffered LIHEAP state plan. It is even more compelling today that DHS reevaluate its LIHEAP policies and actively coordinate its efforts with us and with the regulated utility community in order to truly maximize energy assistance dollars across the Commonwealth. I look forward to continuing this discussion with all interested parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sweet. Any further discussion?
Chairman, I do have a statement.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. Actually, this is a joint statement with Commissioner Yanora and myself. We'd ask that our joint statement be entered into the record as though we read it in its entirety. As indicated, this is a matter of a petition for reconsideration filed by the Office of Consumer Advocates. By order entered on November 5th, 2019, the Commission introduced and approved a final revised CAP policy statement. The revised CAP policy statement sets forth new guidelines for customer assistance programs, including reduced maximum energy burdens. The November 5th order directed and named utilities to make the compliance filing in response to the new guidelines. The Office of Consumer Advocate requests that the Commission reconsider and/or clarify two elements in the November 5th order. First, as indicated, the OCA questions if the Commission's considered the impact of the new recommended energy burdens for customers at or below 50% of the federal poverty level on LIHEAP grants. The OCA requests that the Commission require the utilities to analyze this issue and present their findings as part of the new compliance filing. Since the Commission's November 5th order recommends the use of additional ratepayer funds to further reduce CAP bills, customers at or below 50% of the federal poverty level may not be billed amounts high enough to use the full amount of their federally funded LIHEAP grants. This would then require utilities to return excess LIHEAP funds to the Department of Human Services, which the OCA correctly identifies as a, quote, insufficient use of scarce resources, end quote. We find that the OCA has not met the standard for reconsideration on this issue. As noted throughout the November 5th order, the parties raised and the Commission considered the impacts of LIHEAP on CAP customer bills. While the analysis requested that the OCA does not appear in the November 5th order, the Commission is not required to discuss every issue raised in the proceeding of the orders. However, if the final revised CAP policy statement had been issued for comment, this issue could have been raised and addressed more directly in the November 5th order. We agree with the OCA that the specific interaction between LIHEAP and CAP is worthy of further consideration and even more specific findings. We encourage the utilities to address this concern in their universal service and energy conservation plans if they choose to adopt the new recommended energy burdens. Second, the OCA requests clarification that the compliance filings are to include cost information for the revised CAPs. The OCA has met the standard for reconsideration on this issue. The November 5th order, quote, strongly urged, end quote, the utilities to revise their CAPs by or before January 1st, 2021, but did not require the utilities to provide cost estimates for implementing the new guidelines. The Commission must ensure that the universal service programs are operated in a cost-effective manner. the Commission failed to address how reviewing plan amendments without cost information meets the statutory obligation. Without utility-provided cost information, the Commission cannot conclude that the revised cap balances the interest of the residential consumer who benefit from the programs with the residential customers who pay for the program. We share OCA's particular concern for those households with low and moderate incomes who do not participate in CAPS, with those incomes place them yet beyond the eligibility requirement for CAPS. If the Commission wants to now direct the compliance filings are to include enrollment and budgetary projections for any new cap provisions the utilities propose to implement, the Commission should modify the November 5th order and also grant the OCA's petition for reconsideration on this issue, as we believe that cost information is necessary and would grant the OCA's petition in this regard. Accordingly, we would grant in part and deny in part the OCA's petition for reconsideration and/or clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
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 The motion passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioners Coleman and Unora. And I also would note their specific comments on their dissent.
Turning to page 9, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed order in the petition for reconsideration filed by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania regarding the Customer Assistance Program policy statement.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Vice Chairman Sweet, second by Commissioner Place. Any discussion?
Chairman, we have a joint motion on this matter.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. It's a joint statement between Commissioner Unora and myself. And I'd ask that our joint statement be entered in the record as though we read it in its entirety. Before the Commission for consideration and disposition on merits is the petition for reconsideration and/or clarification filed by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania regarding the Commission's final revised cap policy statement order entered November 5, 2019. EAP challenges the requirements that all electric distribution companies and natural gas distribution companies file an addendum to their current or proposed universal service and energy conservation plan, quote, to indicate how they intend to implement the policy changes specified in the amended final cap policy statement by or before January 1st, 2021, end quote. EAP requests that the Commission modify its order such that submissions of a USAP addendum is voluntary rather than mandatory. EAP also requests that the Commission allow for the implementation of the final revised cap policy statement on a case-by-case basis through routine utility-initiated filings. While we find that EAP has met the standard for reconsideration and that accordingly the petition should be granted, first, reconsideration is warranted because the language of the order creates compliance obligations. As such, the order oversteps the legal limits of what policy statements are permitted to achieve. We agree with EAP that the Commission is only permitted to establish binding policy by means of either a rulemaking or adjudication. Therefore, we believe that the Commission overlooked an inconsistency between the mandatory addendum filing requirements set forth in the order and the voluntary implementation of the new cap guidelines. Second, reconsideration is warranted because the addendum requirement appears to initiate a compliance proceeding with procedural and practical implications not fully addressed in the order. The language of the order could lead one to reasonably conclude that the required addendum was more than just a general status report. The language of the order seems to indicate that such addendum was to function as a binding de facto petition to amend the USAP subject to the expedited review process that may have differed from the standard review of USAPs. Since it is now clear that utilities must file a petition to amend their USAPs if they choose to incorporate any of the new cap guidelines, EAP is correct that the Commission should waive the filing directives related to the addendum. Utilities often preview their various plans with the Commission. That practice can be encouraged but should remain voluntary. Moreover, we share EAP's concern that the Commission staff, and we would add stakeholders, may have not enough time to adequately review and approve revisions to all utility use apps before the suggested operational date, and approve revisions to all utility use apps before the suggested date of January 1st, 2021, especially if such revisions are filed simultaneously. Accordingly, we believe that the Commission overlooked the procedural complexities that will result from the addendum requirements set forth in the order. As such, we agree with the utility use app should be voluntarily updated as initiated by routine utility filings and reviewed by the Commission on a case-by-case basis. We find that EAP petitions should be granted in this instance. We reiterate that we agree with many of the recommended changes set forth in the final revised CAP policy statement. Because many of these changes are significant, we believe that they should be implemented in a reasonable and measured way consistent with historic Commission review of utility use app filings. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
The motion passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioner Coleman and Commissioner Unora.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the regular agenda. Turning now to the carry-in. On page 1 of the carry-in agenda, there is the motion of Commissioner Unora.
I recognize Commissioner Unora.
Thank you, Chair. I ask that my motion be entered onto the record as if I read it in its entirety. I am making this motion to support two long-standing goals of the Commonwealth's regulations for utility water and wastewater services. The first goal is to take a fresh look at how the Commission examines applications for consolidation and reorganization of Pennsylvania's water and wastewater providers under Section 3.501 of our regulations. The regulation was enacted over 40 years ago, and to better coordinate the Commission review of the utility acquisition application with the requirements of the Department of Environmental Protection. The second goal is to address the increasing awareness of emerging contaminants like lead, PFAS, and Legionella. The Commission has recognized and continues to respond to the need to do more to address these issues, including in its authority over the water utilities cross-connection control programs. I note that there have been multiple school closures in Scranton area due to lead contamination. Also, just last week, Governor Wolf proposed significant budget investments to remediate lead in schools, daycares, homes, and public drinking supplies. Based on my experience dealing with these contaminants, cross-connection control programs are a critical tool to eliminate these substances from our public drinking waters. To ensure safe drinking water for all of our residents of the Commonwealth, the Commission should exercise its existing tariff approval of authority to address the implements of cross-connection control. To that end, I move that the Law Bureau, in conjunction with the Bureau of Technical Utility Services, prepare an advance notice of proposed rulemaking order consistent with my written motion regarding Section 3.501 of our regulations. And I would like to commend our staff in Law Bureau and TUS for the continued efforts in examining these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. You have heard the motion of Commissioner Unora. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion on the motion? I do have a verbal comment. Just want to acknowledge and commend Commissioner Unora for bringing forth this motion, but also to acknowledge and thank our staff from TUS and Law Bureau who have always looked to address regulations that may be old and need to be reconsidered and to bring forth to us, and have been actually working on looking at this for a long time, so I just want to thank them as well. Any further comments on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Continuing on page 1 of the carry-in, there is your motion, Madam Chairman.
I'm going to ask Vice Chairman Sweet if he could preside while I offer my motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you're recognized for the purposes of offering your motion.
Thank you. I ask that my motion be spread upon the record as if I read it in its entirety. So every January, leaders of the Commonwealth agencies such as myself and my fellow commissioners pledge to support hiring, compensating, training, and advancing individuals based on merit, regardless of their diverse identities, while promoting affirmative action steps to eliminate barriers for protected groups. On March 24, 1995, this commission adopted its Statement of Policy on Diversity at Major Jurisdictional Utility Companies. When proposed by Commissioner Lisa Crutchfield at the time, these guidelines were seen as, and were in fact, groundbreaking and progressive for that time. 25 years later, I believe that it is an opportune time to reinvigorate the Commission's efforts to promote diversity programs at our major jurisdictional utility companies. Pennsylvania is a diverse state when it comes to energy production, natural resources, manufacturing, agriculture, and at last but not least, the citizens of this Commonwealth. Our jurisdictional public utilities should draw on the strengths provided by the diverse citizens of the state, who I might add are also utility customers. As such, jurisdictional utilities should continue to develop and implement company-wide diverse programs for employment and contracting of goods and services. These programs should focus on how to maintain or increase the number of qualified minority, women, disabled, LGBTQ, and veteran employees, vendors, and service providers. The Commission launched a utility careers campaign in the fall of 2017 to address the looming problem of increased utility workforce retirements. Properly structured, diversity programs can successfully leverage untapped talent pools to help fill these critical utility jobs. Furthermore, as regulated monopolies, our jurisdictional utilities have unique beneficial community relationships, which I believe diversity programs have the power to strengthen. Our current policy statement encourages utilities to file a diversity report with the Commission annually. In reviewing the information filed, staff has found that in many instances, the companies are either including too much information, not enough information, or unnecessary information in the reports. In an attempt to solicit the appropriate information, I have composed a list of suggested revisions for the reporting guidelines. 1, update the definition of diversity to include minorities, women, veterans, LGBTQ, and the disabled. 2, provide a standard reporting form with the goal of collecting the following information. A copy of any corporate policy committed to improving diversity in the workplace and in the procurement process. B, a description of any training implemented on diversity initiatives in employment and in the contract of goods and services. C, a standardized form to account for diverse employee numbers, a description of any diversity recruiting strategies, a description of any diversity promotion efforts, a description of any diversity retention efforts, a brief description of any involvement with organizations promoting diversity, and a brief summary of diverse-owned businesses the company contracts with for goods and services, as well as include percentage of dollars spent with diverse-owned businesses versus non-diverse businesses. I believe that this list may streamline the filing process for the reporting utilities, as well as the review process for the Commission. Finally, I believe that the Commission should initiate a rulemaking to change the guidelines found in the policy statement as modified in this proceeding into mandatory reporting requirements. I look forward to reviewing any comments filed by interested stakeholders during the rulemaking process. Therefore, I move that 1, the Law Bureau shall commence an update of the guidelines contained in the policy statement at 52 PA Code Section 69.801 through .809 and issue an amended policy statement. Comments to the amended policy statement will be due within 45 days of issuance. And 2, the Law Bureau shall issue a notice of proposed rulemaking for a diversity reporting requirement by December 31st, 2020.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a second?
Second?
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Seeing none, the motion is carried by a vote of 5-0. Without objection, we'll enter the same roll call vote for the matter as modified by the motion. Seeing no objection, 5-0 vote will again be entered. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sweet.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the carry-in. Turning to the supplemental carry-in agenda, it is recommended by the Law Bureau that the Commission adopt the proposed order in the petition of Verizon Pennsylvania and Verizon North.
Is there a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coleman, second by Commissioner Unora. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Madam Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes all items to be considered today.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Before we adjourn, I would like to specifically announce the date of the 2020 Multi-Agency Black History Month program. As you know, the PUC is one of the lead agencies that have been organizing this event for the last 3 decades or more. The date for the event, the main event, is Wednesday, February 12th, from noon to 1 p.m. at the Forum Building. There is also a reception the night before from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the State Museum. The theme of this year's Black History program is African Americans and the Vote. And the keynote speaker is Representative Edward Gainey from Allegheny County. And we encourage our employees, as we always have, and those of you that are here for this meeting, to attend this event. So if there's nothing else to come before us, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? I think they want to stay here. Motion by Vice Chairman Sweet, second by Commissioner Coleman. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We are adjourned.